Yeah. Good to get started? Yeah, okay. Hi, it's nice to meet you all. If you are willing, it'd be nice if you could maybe come one row closer, or if you're comfortable, even you can sit in the front here. It's nice to meet you all. How many of you are here? Is anybody here for the first time? Akiko? So you've all been here before? Do you know each other? Some of you? Yeah. Would it be okay if we did a quick around the room, just your name and what brought you here today? Maybe we can start over here.
My name's
Elena, nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Rihanna, here to learn, right? And for my life to kind of change.
Once again, I will disappoint you. It's nice to meet you. Leon, you said?
Yes.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Hi.
I am Archie.
Nice. Archie, we communicated via
Yes,
email. I owe you an
exactly.
email back, sorry. I'm just being confronted on all levels here. Okay, I owe you an email. My bad. Nice to meet you. Hi, Jay. Nice to meet you. What brought you here today? Oh, again, stop with the pressure, you guys. Well, once again, I'm sorry to disappoint in advance, but it's nice to meet you. Thank you for being here and for encouraging me. Hi. Givas, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. Hi.
Hi, I'm May.
Did you say May?
Yes.
This is, you guys are just setting me up to failure. This is so funny. Hi, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Gitanjali. I'm here out of curiosity, actually genuinely to learn. So,
It's nice to meet
great
you.
be here with you.
Nice to meet you. My sister's name is Anjali. It's Geeta Anjali.
Gitanjali.
Beautiful. Nice to meet you. Hi.
Hi, my name is Akiko. I'm here
Because I forced her. I'm like, what if nobody comes? Do you want to come? Thank you, Akiko. And our beautiful Kirtania.
my name is Emily. I'm here to learn also and to see all of you. It's really so yeah, faces and smiles.
It's a beautiful, beautiful Kirtan, Emily. Thank you. Set the mood really beautifully. Thank you. And hi.
And I'm Bertrand Riley. And here to spend time with all these smiling faces. Look at them smile.
The sun came out just after Akiko and I walked in the rain to get here. As soon as we walked in, the sun came out. Well, it's very nice to meet you all. My name is Radha Bhakti. I have been a lifelong practitioner of Bhakti Yoga. I wanted to give just a quick intro on what Bhakti Yoga is. And so apologies if this is ABCs for some of you, maybe you know this, but I always find it's good to ground ourselves in the basics. So we are here because we are inside of the Bhakti Center, because here we practice Bhakti Yoga. So typically when we think of yoga, what do you all think of? What do most people think of when you hear the word yoga? Stretching. You think of the asanas, right? You think of the different positions that we take. Why are you shaking your head?
No, I would say something more complicated. But no, that's not like 50. Like I was really like, oh, yoga.
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, what do people typically think? Okay, cool. So yeah, so that's what people typically think about, right? Is the physical asanas when we do Ashtanga yoga or other types of yoga. But yoga, as I think everybody in this room knows, is part of a large philosophy, and yoga is actually a lifestyle. And the word yoga is a Sanskrit word that actually means to connect. And by definition, to connect means to connect with something or with someone. And so that's kind of what this philosophy is about. It's a lifestyle. And the most sort of popular yoga text is called the Bhagavad Gita. Is my hair in the way? Is that what you're looking at? Yeah, I will do that. So the most sort of prominent yoga text is the Bhagavad Gita. And for those of you who don't, does anybody not know the Bhagavad Gita? does everybody know the two sort of main speakers in the Bhagavad Gita? Does anybody not know? Does anybody want to shout out the?
Incredibly not.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you, no, no. Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly it. Then you know. Then we're good. I'm gonna go home now. You changed my life. I'm good, Leon. So as Leon mentioned, the Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between somebody named Krishna and his very good friend Arjun. And Arjun is about to embark on a war. And this conversation is happening at the onset of this war, where, hi, come on in. So Arjun is facing on the opposing army, he is facing many of his friends, many of his family members, many people that he considers to be like fathers and uncles and grandfathers to him and teachers. And right before going to war, he has a crisis. He has a crisis of, what am I doing? How can I possibly fight in this war against people who I love and people who love me? And his was a very righteous cause. The reason for the war was definitely valid and founded. But of course, he was overcome with emotion when he saw on the opposing side, all of his family and friends and so on. And so he says to Krishna, I'm shaking and I don't know what to do. And I don't think I can do this. And I need you to tell me what to do. And the Bhagavad Gita is a conversation about life that ensues at that moment. So in this moment where Arjun is having the most existential crisis any of us could potentially imagine being in, is when Krishna's like, okay, let's talk about life, and recites the entire Bhagavad Gita prior to this war. So the very first lesson in the Bhagavad Gita, and it's the main sort of premise upon which every other teaching of the Bhagavad Gita and yoga texts is based, is that we are not our bodies. We are the spirit soul that resides within these bodies. And therefore, any of the designations that could belong to the body, like male, female, white, black, gay, straight, these are all designations that belong to the body and not to the soul. And Bhakti yoga is yoga for the soul. So it doesn't matter what kind of body you're in. It could be Christian, it could be Hindu, it could be gay, it could be straight or white or black, and so on and so forth, a lawyer, a doctor, it doesn't matter. This is a philosophy for the soul. It could also, the soul is also what resides, according to Bhakti yoga philosophy. Animals and plants also have souls. So this philosophy is also for them. It's for the benefit of all spirit souls. And according to the tradition of Bhakti, we are all part and parcel of the supreme soul. So my soul is exactly of the same quality as yours and yours and yours and yours, even though in these lives, we come from different walks of life and different sorts of backgrounds and upbringings. This is a philosophy that transcends all of that. It's for anyone and everyone. So I just want to give one or two quick analogies to demonstrate the body-soul connection. So Prabhupada, who is the person who brought Bhakti yoga from the East to the West and then around the world, he often gives this metaphor that imagine a car and a driver, right? Without the driver, the car is a lump of matter. It's a lump of metal and plastic and other things that I don't know because I know nothing about cars. So that's a bunch of stuff that sits there and becomes the function of the car is to go from point A to point B. And it can only do that with the driver. So the driver is what gives the car life. The driver is what will actually fulfill the purpose of the car by actually physically driving that from point A to point B. And so similarly, without the soul, the body is a lump of matter. The body is flesh and blood and bones and blood and all of that. It's matter. And it's the soul that gives the body life, according to this philosophy. So you can see that this is pretty universal across many, many spiritual traditions. You'll see that, sometimes you go to a funeral and you look at the coffin and people might be standing above the coffin and they'll say that like, wow, I can't believe he's gone or she's gone, but the body is there, right? So there's some understanding that something has left the body and that he or she is maybe watching from above or maybe they're in the room with us right now. So they're not their body. There's something that left the body that's there. And that's a pretty universal understanding. So we're going to keep bringing it back to that topic today because that's fundamental. And I mentioned that I've been practicing Bhakti yoga my whole life. And while what I just said to you to me is clear, all of the ways that that manifests and like the purport to that, I feel like for many lifetimes we could still like not fully grasp that concept. It's so deep actually. And we just kind of scratch the surface to get like a preliminary understanding of what that means. So with that, also I just want to say that's why this is called Talks for the Soul, Soul Talks, because again, it doesn't matter what kind of body you're in, this is relevant to anyone and everyone. Okay, so today, as you know, the topic of today is building meaningful relationships, and we're going to speak about relationships that are not just romantic, all kinds of relationships. They could be romantic, they could be your friendships, they could be with your families, and also with ourselves. So that's what we're going to be speaking about today. All right, so first question that I have, go ahead, do you have a question?
No, sorry.
No, it's okay, it's just a stretch, okay. That's okay, please feel free to stretch, don't apologize. Oh, sorry to hear that. Yeah, we can swap stories later. So maybe you can start with telling me, just yell out, what are some of the qualities that you appreciate in your close relationships? What do you value? Trust, connection, caring, boundaries, good one. Yeah, anybody else? Time. That's an interesting one. We're going to talk about that later, actually. What else? Love. Respect. What do you not value? And it could just be the opposite of what you said, but is there anything else that comes to mind when I say what is a quality that you don't value in your relationships? Dishonesty. I feel like we're all about to speak from experience. Dishonesty, disloyalty, anything else? Distance, like emotional distance, you mean? Anything else? Hi, what's your name? Jignasha, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming. Attachment is something you don't value or you do value? Can you elaborate on that one?
I really just kind of takes away the focus. Maybe what you can get out of a relationship.
Okay. So like some sort of unhealthy or excessive attachment can take away. Yeah, that's a really good one. Thanks for saying that. Anything else that comes to mind? Okay. So this is a model by Tony Robbins. I don't know if you're all familiar with Tony Robbins, but actually I'm not his biggest fan, but I really do appreciate this model. He talks about how every human has 6 core needs. And those core needs are what you see in the middle. So certainty, also uncertainty or variety, significance, connection and love, growth and contribution. So I really appreciate this model because I think this is at the level of the soul. So let's talk through it for a moment. We all have a core need for certainty. When I'm healthy and when I'm at a high level of consciousness, that need for certainty can manifest in organization, in ritual, in authenticity. When I'm not in a healthy place, that core need for certainty can manifest in things like trying to control others, trying to maybe developing some obsessive compulsion, and even procrastination. Another core need is to have some variety or uncertainty in life. Again, when I'm healthy and when I'm in a good place, then that can be manifest in discovering new challenges, in coming up with cool hobbies, some playfulness, some creativity. Sorry, when I see your face, Rajrani, I feel like I should do this. Okay. Because she put, what's your name again? Yeah, yours. May, because I see Rajrani's like out, like, you know, on the side of May, like her face like this. And I'm like, oh, microphone. Okay, sorry. Where did it go, Akiko? We had a whole conversation about how I lose Frenchies on a daily basis. Anyway, it's okay. Thank you for asking. I'm good. When I'm unhealthy, this need for variety sometimes manifests in creating drama. Sometimes people are, do you ever experience that maybe within yourself or with other people, that out of boredom, it's almost like I'm going to pick a fight with my boyfriend or my girlfriend or my whatever, my significant other. I do that. I'm like, I'm just going to get mad at you for something that I'm not normally mad at you about because I need attention or like, I need you to tell me you love me or whatever that is. So when you're in an unhealthy or in a lower state of consciousness, that need for variety can become manifest in these ways. My need for significance when I'm healthy, I need to feel significant. Therefore, I will go and try to give back. I will try to volunteer. I will try to lead in an authentic and kind way. When I'm not healthy, that need for significance, oh, I have, the gossip on this person and like, I'm significant and important because I have this. And therefore I'm elevating my own importance by doing something that's unhealthy, by putting other people down, by becoming a victim. I feel like we can have multiple soul talks on just victimhood because it's such a deep topic. Rajrani is a coach and she knows all about this, but sometimes when we become attached to the identity of being a victim, it's actually because we're self-important. Sometimes people say when people are self-important, they're really, really proud, but it could also, the other side of the same coin is saying like, oh, I'm the worst and I'm so bad. It's actually elevating myself to be super important, and it's not healthy to stay in that mentality. Of course, we all feel like victims sometimes, but it's about where do we live most of the time? Do we swing back to that healthy range of consciousness or do we stay in that unhealthy range? Another core need, not surprising, is connection and love. So when I'm healthy, I have love for myself. I seek healthy relationships. I might develop some sort of faith in something sublime or divine. And when I'm unhealthy, I can become really, really needy and attached in an unhealthy way, to your point. I can engage in self-harm because I'm trying to draw in that attention and that connection and that love. With growth, if I want to grow and I'm healthy, then I'm a constant student, I'm a teacher, and I'm humble. When I'm unhealthy, that need for information could be seeking information that's not conducive to my growth or anybody else's growth. It could be, sometimes we go on like these Google rabbit holes, right? Where it's just like suddenly, I'm Googling all the, you're watching it. This is what I do. I'm watching a TV show and I Google the cast and like half an hour later, I'm like, why am I Googling like where this particular spider in the world comes from all of a sudden? Like that's like an unhealthy consciousness at that moment. And contribution, we all have the need to feel like we're contributing to the world. So when I'm healthy, that's manifesting maybe some charity and again, some giving back, some maybe engaging in coaching or mentorship. And when I'm unhealthy, that need for contribution, it's like, I'm going to give, but I'm doing it because I need something back because that makes me feel validated, or burnout or martyrdom. So when you see this list, you might be thinking, what about this is relevant to building healthy relationships? Because the connection and love piece is pretty clear, right? Like that's obvious, like why that would be part of a building meaningful relationships talk. But the rest of it, when you think about it, everything that you see on the unhealthy side affects the way we show up in relationships. And so if we don't work on, first of all, be conscious of these 6 core needs that we all have, and then be conscious of, am I showing up on the left side of this screen or am I showing up on the right side? It's going to affect our ability to have meaningful relationships. So meaningful relationships truly begin by looking inside. And we're going to talk more about that as well. Because typically, again, when you think about relationships, you think about externally. How am I showing up externally? How is that person, showing up for me? But actually the beginning of meaningful relationships is going inside. Okay, I'll pause. Any thoughts on this? Any reflections? Again, you guys move your hand and I think you're raising your hand, but you're not. No, don't apologize. Okay, cool.
I like the sense of balance. More connection.
Yeah.
Actually, like we have like distance to that brings more value to connecting.
Yeah. It's an art, it's not a science, right? And I feel like it's very human to swing on either side of the pendulum, but where do we tend to live? Do we live in the middle or do we live more on the right or the left is where we need to pay attention. So we talked about how first of all, our true identity is the spirit soul that resides within the body. And we talked about how these core needs are really speaking at the level of the soul. So what does Bhakti say about the soul? Bhakti says that the qualities of the soul in Sanskrit are Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Has anybody heard this before? Cool. So it's not a new concept. So you can see that we are always trying to fulfill these natures. When you think about eternality, you can think about how much the world, how much the advertising agency or industry wants us to not age, and how that's so important, and how we're always looking for the anti-aging serums, and how when you see gray hair, it's an identity crisis, or when you see like there's a wrinkle, it's like, oh my gosh, what's happening to my life? This midlife crisis thing, this quarter life crisis thing, it's all because the soul seeks eternality. And I know I'm not a parent, but for my friends who are parents, they say like, that's the one thing that really makes you aware of your mortality, that like, wait, I'm going to die one day and I'm going to leave this child behind. And like, I don't want to, now I'm going to be healthy and all of that. This is not an unhealthy way to think, but you know, we are always trying to fulfill this nature of eternality. And then filled with knowledge. So it goes back to the previous slide about some of our core needs. And one of them is to feel significant. And we might do that by, again, this information sharing that could be either healthy or not. The gossip industry is based on the need of the soul to be knowledgeable. It's just misdirected, right? It's directed in the wrong, to the wrong area, where we're putting people down instead of building people up. But that's the gossip industry, is like how many multi-billions of dollars? It's because of this tendency that we have as souls. And then finally, Ananda. Actually, the soul is filled with happiness. And so when we are feeling unhappy, which is regularly because we're human, it's something that's covering the soul. Because actually our nature is to be happy all the time. And so when we are experiencing difficulties and when we're experiencing anxiety or unhappiness, it's because we're being covered by what we call the modes of nature in the material world, but also so many other factors. But that's actually not who we are as spirit souls. We're always as happy as can be. Now, according to this philosophy, and I think every philosophy would agree, true happiness comes from rasa, or relationship, or variety in relationship. And so again, that's why this is important, that meaningful relationships, it's a need of the soul. So you see sometimes people are like, I don't need anybody, I'm fine. I have my job and my TV and I'm happy, I don't need anyone. That person, when you hear that, chances are that person is actually deeply hurt. There's some deep pain there, because actually this is a need of the soul. We cannot, just like water cannot stop being wet, we cannot stop craving connection and happiness through relationship. Okay, just want to, right. So when we don't get the love that we seek, because once again, this is the nature of the soul, so we're always seeking love, this can result in frustration, and we end up seeking happiness and connection in ways that can be shallow. So happiness we might seek by things like, for example, things like maybe retail therapy, which I mean, I'm super guilty of that, but obviously that's not like the long-term solution for happiness. We might seek happiness or an escape because we can't find happiness from intoxication. We might seek it from actually having unhealthy relationships because we just want some connection, even if that's temporary. This is the need of the soul, we want it. So then we seek it in a temporary way, and then we tell ourselves that we're okay with it. But ultimately we're just creating additional pain inside because we can't sort of face that. So our very definition of love in the material world, we were just talking about it, Akiko and I, about how Akiko was mentioning rom-coms, romantic comedies, and how they're so just like, number one, filled with drama, but number two, actually they give you this unrealistic idea and picture of what love and romance should look like, and it's not reality. And we're going to talk through that as well. Let's see. Yeah, the last point I wanted to make on this slide about love and about connection is that in yoga philosophy, we learn that everything is actually temporary, including our relationships. So not to sound dire, that doesn't mean that like we're all going to break up and fight. It means that it happens. Breakups happen. You see people disowning their parents. You see people disowning their children. But if nothing else, even if we have wonderful, happy, healthy relationships, the nature of this material world is that we will be separated by death ultimately. So sorry to be a little bit dire there for a moment, but this is an important context for us to understand, because how do we, knowing that our meaningful relationships, number one, are they meaningful? Number two, how can they be lasting? It's important to know that actually in the material world, they are temporary. So how does that change the way we should show up? So meaningful and lasting relationships are selfless. Whereas those relationships that, I feel a little harsh saying shallow, but maybe just less meaningful, are more selfish. In a meaningful relationship, there is accountability. In those relationships that are less meaningful, there's more escapism and these notions that we learn in pop psychology. The rest of this talk is going to be going through each of these 5 things, so we'll go through in more detail. Meaningful relationships are characterized by compassion, whereas shallow and temporary relationships are characterized by impatience. So you might be wondering, like, how is impatience the opposite of compassion? So we're going to talk through that. Meaningful relationships are active versus inactive, and steady versus unsteady. So we're going to go through and discuss each of these. I'm going to keep going, but if anybody has a question or a comment, feel free to just holler, okay? All right. Selfless. This is the first quality that we just talked about in that table. What do you all think of when you see this picture? What comes to your mind?
Really happy to be the person being helped.
Okay, I'll be very grateful and happy to be the person being helped. What else comes to mind?
The person that's trying to help the other person is putting himself in danger.
Yeah, exactly. What's your name?
Emilio.
Emilio, thank you for coming. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, does anything else come to mind when you see this picture? Okay, sorry, what were you gonna say?
I don't know, but I'm just imagining they're hiking together up this mountain. Then probably that they need 2 companions during the hike together up anything. So he almost needs them as well. He wants to have them along. So that.
Yeah, thank you. The greater sort of purpose for both of them. The first time I saw this picture, I thought what Emilio said. I was like, that guy's dumb. He needs help. If he's not careful, he is going to fall. What does that mean? What's the metaphor here in relationships? How does that make sense in this context?
When a plane is going down, it says, you have to secure your mask before you put on everybody else's. So perhaps this man needs to make sure that he is not going to fall before he tries to help someone else from not falling.
Exactly. Because what good is he? How can he help someone else if he physically can't help someone else, right? The other analogy, the mask in the airplane one, is a nice one. I've heard Radha, another Bhakti teacher, say, you cannot save a drowning man if you can't swim, right? Were you going to say something, Rajrani?
Yeah, I think there's a vulnerability that's also a good thing. It's a good thing, right? So everything in balance. That there's like I'm gonna put myself out there.
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. So to be selfless in relationship does not mean to be self-sacrificing. And that's sort of the main point to make here. So being selfless in relationship is so important, of course. I'm sure we all have experiences with friends where it feels like it's one-sided. It feels not reciprocal. It feels like I'm giving much more and that person is not reciprocating. And that's a need for the soul to also receive some reciprocation. So that's not a selfish need to want some reciprocation. But again, this pop psychology will tell you that being friends and being a good friend means to just, always put the other person first, which might, again, it just requires some emotional intelligence and some context, because once again, sacrifice is a really important element of every relationship. But again, that doesn't mean to be self-sacrificing. I'm just going to check out my notes.
I like that, sacrifice versus self-sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly. Any thoughts on this? Any sort of anecdotes anybody wants to share from their own lives about sacrifice or selfishness in relationship?
Share one thing.
Yeah, please.
Sacrifice, I guess I actually haven't figured out how to word this properly yet. But I do think in a way sacrifice to hurt yourself to save someone else is a myth and false. But that doesn't mean, you can't sacrifice, your time in a relationship, right? Like if your friend needs you for something and you want to go to the movies that day, extremely simple example, but so you'll sacrifice not going to the movie, that's fine. But talking about like actually like I'm gonna be this martyr, I'm gonna go through all this pain so I can save everyone else. Like, no, it doesn't work.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. But let's talk more about sacrifice. Do you think, I'm going to just stick with you for a moment. Do you think that sacrifice is important or needed in a relationship? Can you have a meaningful relationship without sacrifice?
I just like the word giving better. I think I just have a personal gripe with the word sacrifice.
Okay.
Experiences that I've had in my life.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, I think giving is necessary. Sacrifice is necessary in the regards of you can't always have everything perfectly your way, whether it's your schedule or whatever it is. I think it's important.
Yeah. Another word for were you going to say something, Emilio?
Oh,
No. Okay. Again, I don't know how to read anybody's body signals. You know what? I forgot how to be in person with people, honestly. I'm very socially awkward now. One of the most important aspects of bhakti and of many, many spiritual practices is the concept of austerity, which is another way of saying sacrifice. And austerity in our relationship, again, bhakti means relationship or connection to something. And in bhakti, that divine personality, we most often refer to him as Krishna. Krishna also has a feminine aspect called Radha. But most often when we refer to God, we refer to him as Krishna. We refer to a male personality called Krishna. And this bhakti means devotion. It means an active, loving relationship with Krishna that is manifested in many different ways. And an important element of our relationship with Krishna is austerity. And so similarly, if we are a mirror of that, then any important element of any relationship, is austerity as well. And the reason is, to your point, that it's nice and important to be giving. When we are giving, when it's only convenient for us, then there's only so much depth that the relationship can have. There's only so much gratitude that one can feel. But when there is some austerity and sacrifice, and I take your point that the word might be a little bit triggering, but just the concept of being able to give one thing up in order to invest in somebody else, that creates depth and a level of gratitude that is, again, deeper than without that aspect. So sacrifice and austerity is an exceptionally important aspect of our relationships. And that's what helps to make them more meaningful and deep and lasting. In our relationship with God, you'll see that in many spiritual traditions, there might be an element of fasting. There might be an element of, in bhakti, we have a morning program that starts at 4:30 in the morning, definitely an austerity, but something that deepens in your relationship with God as well. So this notion of austerity is a spiritual notion that we can manifest with our relationships as well. Okay. The next concept was accountability. What does this word bring up to you all when we talk about that in the context of relationships? What comes up? Yeah. Communicating properly. That's a nice one. Yeah, that's not normally what comes to my mind first about accountability, but that's a really good one. Yeah. What else?
Or walking the talk.
Walking the talk, integrity. I love that. Yeah. Were you gonna say something? Yeah.
Like being able to apologize.
Mm,
I feel like we can't always blame the other person for conflict. There's always a two-way street. So,
Yeah.
like, knowing your part.
yeah. Actually, that's one of the notes that I have for this section. I just heard a talk yesterday that when we judge someone without understanding their circumstances, the three ways, and just generally speaking, the three ways to sort of try to make up for that. The speaker was saying 3 A's. Number 1 is to acknowledge. Number 2 is to apologize. And number 3 is to amend. But to your point, you can also give many talks on just the art of apologizing, like what constitutes an acceptable apology. So we'll talk through that in a moment as well. Just want to continue the question. What else comes up for you when you think about accountability?
It's like owning what you do, like when you're actually.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So back to this point about apology. What's a good apology and what's a not great apology? What characterizes that? We all have experience, right? Yeah. What's coming to mind?
Bad apologies, like I apologize. Like,
Yes. Thank you. Why don't more people get that? Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm gonna wring your neck if somebody says that to me again. Like my husband said that to me the other day, and I was like, no, we're gonna stop that right now. What else? Anything else that comes to mind about a bad or a good apology?
I think good apology doesn't always expect forgiveness right away.
Yeah.
I mean, like you give them that space to accept the apology, but just
Yeah. Yeah. What else? Thank you. That's really helpful. What else comes to mind? What's one of the best apologies you've heard or given? Yeah. Oh, please tell me bad.
I'm sorry, but you know you did.
Oh.
I'm sorry, but.
Yeah, we're done after that. Yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah.
For me, it's a level of sincerity.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How can you exhibit sincerity?
The person's mood, person's facial expressions.
Yeah.
The quality of what's being said to
Yeah.
me. So many things.
Yeah. Yeah. Facial expression, mood, quality,
Detail.
the details. Yeah. I'm thinking of the word empathy. I know that this is in psychology, they say that some of the differences between traditional male, traditional females is that females really have this need to feel understood. I personally relate to that. And so for me, a good apology is if somebody says, I understand that when I did A, I made you feel like this. To me, it's like, once I receive that understanding, I'm good. Like, I'm so like, we're good, we're fine. But if somebody doesn't get it, I feel like a sense of like, that wasn't the closure that I needed for that situation. I just want you to understand. I don't want you to suffer. I don't want you to pay for it. If I feel understood, then like forgiveness for me is much easier. Okay, anything else comes to mind? Yep, go ahead.
I was like, that's why with women sometimes when they complain about something, it's usually about something that came before it that added up to a specific thing, like the problems keep adding up. And then it could be a small thing, and then usually a guy will be like, why is she mad about this small thing? All things like before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I noticed.
Yeah. I think honestly, I think that's true for men and women. But yeah, I definitely hear that from a lot of my male friends too. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Anything else about acknowledge, apologize, amend? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's like you apologize for the 6 times and you're still doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you gonna do differently?
Yeah. Sometimes actions speak louder than words. And so I feel like amend is more action oriented. So to your point, like the absence of something or doing something to truly amend for whatever happened. Yeah, thank you. Anything else? Okay. So what I wanted to also talk about around accountability is I wanted to ask you about pop psychology. What do you hear in like the world about accountability as it relates to our relationships? Probably, oh, go ahead.
That being accountable could be sometimes seen as weak.
Yeah.
Because people are like, oh no, I'm this, whatever, halfway somewhere, halfway somewhere.
Yes. Yeah, yes, exactly. So I think initially that was people maybe couldn't think of something to say because we don't hear a lot about taking accountability because, to your point, one of many reasons is because it's seen as being weak or vulnerability. To your point earlier, it's not necessarily seen as a strength. So pop psychology, and I love her to death, and she would kill me if she heard me say it, but my sister has a tattoo that says "Let it go," and I made so much fun of her when she got that tattoo because I'm like, that is so not. That is what we hear in pop psychology. Let's Marie Kondo our lives. If it doesn't feel good, let it go. You know, if he's not treating you right, girl, just walk away, you know? And there's truth to that. But what happens if I maybe did something or I have some responsibility in the situation as well, and then he reacts in a certain way and I'm like, you know what? It doesn't feel good. I'm walking away. People walk away from marriages because of this. People walk away from their parents, from their children because of this. Because there is no, I have a friend who, she was married for 10 years, she got divorced. And, you know, there's no question that she was married to a man who definitely didn't treat her properly. Definitely, there's no question about it. It wasn't abusive, but it was not a good match. And years later, I asked her, so what did you learn? Like, is there something that you felt like you could have done differently? She said, no, I was perfect. Like, I was a really good, dedicated, loyal, faithful wife, and he just wasn't a good husband. And I was like, this is a problem. This is a problem. If you can't look inside and say, well, I think, you know, definitely he shouldn't have treated me that way, but I can also take ownership and responsibility for ABC. That is not, to your point, Emilio, that's not valued in society. It's not valued in relationships. It's not valued at the workplace. You have to be so brave to be that person. You have to be brave to be a spiritualist, because looking inside, as we started this talk about, is to be spiritual, and looking inside is to be accountable. Relationships, we will not have meaningful, lasting relationships if we cannot hold ourselves accountable. Now, the other thing is we can also hold our friends accountable too, as long as the intention is right. So it's not that I'm holding you to account because I feel wronged and you better fix it. It's I'm holding you to account because I love you and I want to help you also be the best version of yourself. Because without accountability, none of us is the best version of ourselves. If we cannot look inside and say, all right, this was my bad, do the acknowledge, apologize, amend, take accountability and ownership for where my role in the demise of a friendship or a situation, then we cannot have meaningful relationships. Okay, cool. Bradrani, what time is it? Sorry, I feel like I'm going long.
It is 12:16.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. The next one was compassionate. This one will be a quick one. Compassion in relationship means it's a quick one, but it's a really important one. Give the benefit of the doubt. Have you ever felt like somebody wasn't giving you the benefit of the doubt? One of my best friends does this to me on a regular basis where, you know, a month after something, she'll be like, you said this thing and it hurt me because of that. And I often find myself saying like, hey, like, give me the benefit of the doubt. You know, I love you. Like, call me out next time because that wasn't the intention of what I was saying. And it's so hard to feel like somebody's not giving you the benefit of the doubt. But in the spirit of going inside, do you feel like sometimes it's hard for you to give the benefit of the doubt to people? And why? Why would that be? Yeah.
For me, sometimes it's hard to give people the benefit of the doubt because I'm the type of person that I've been vulnerable for a very long time. And then sometimes you can see that, especially in New York, that people see vulnerability as like, oh, you're innocent, you're easy to take advantage of. So sometimes I feel like I have to get into a certain mode where like when I'm functioning in society where I cannot be as compassionate as I want because I get taken advantage for it. Because like yesterday, I actually donated a bum $1, and then he started coming at me. He's like, "You didn't give me $3." I didn't know what else to say, but I was upset. I cursed at him and I left.
Yeah.
But that's why it's hard sometimes to be compassionate.
Yeah. Yeah. Because people are ungrateful.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. That's such a blow when you're trying to be kind and you're doing something from your heart and it's met with aggression. That's really hard. And you're speaking about a stranger on the street and that really hurt you.
He wasn't doing anything. All he did was ask for money.
Yeah.
He was open as well.
Yeah. Imagine when that happens with a close friend, when you try to give something from your heart and they're like, what is this? You know, one of the things that we'll talk about, where is it in this talk? It's going to come up a little bit later, but I'll just bring it up now because I think it's related to what you said. Have you all have heard of the 5 love languages? Yeah. Do you know what they are? Can you tell us?
It's gifts,
Mm-hmm.
physical touch, acts of service, quality time.
Words of affirmation. Are you all familiar with those? You've heard of them before? So the person who wrote the book, and his name, it's escaping me right now. He talks about how, so he gives an example of, let's say a husband and a wife, and he gives a stereotypical example of the husband works, the woman stays at home, takes care of the kids, and his primary love language is gift giving. And her primary love language is quality time. And there's one day she's at home, he's at work, and it's a particularly hard day for her. She's like, the kids are crazy. The kids have made a big mess. And it was like really, really hard for her to get the kids to bed. It was really hard. It was a tough day. On the same day, he's at work and feeling immense gratitude to his wife and thinking like, she works so hard. And like society doesn't value, you know, a stay-at-home mother, but like she works harder than I do. And he's feeling like emotional and like loved up. My wife is amazing. And so before he comes home from work, he decides to go to the store and buy her a diamond necklace. Remember, she's at home having this like crappy day. He comes home and this is the scene. She's like washing dishes because the kids made a bigger mess than usual. And he comes home and he says, honey, I wanted to give you this gift because I love you so much. And what's her reaction? Her reaction is she takes it. She's like, I don't want your necklace. I want you to, why are you late? I need you to come and help me with the dishes. I need you to come and, you know, look at this mess that I've been like, what did you, like you went to the mall after work? Like, this is not what I need from you. How does it make him feel? Unappreciated. He's like, I'm also slogging all day and I'm appreciating you with this gift. And then what does she say? She's like, this isn't how I feel appreciated. Like, I'll feel appreciated if you do this. Then they fight. And something like that can break up a marriage too. And so the author of this book, The 5 Love Languages, he talks about how a meaningful relationship is so much work because sometimes you might have 2 different love languages and you have to learn how to speak your partner's language. And it's not just romantic. Again, it could be a friend, it could be a parent. You have to learn how to speak that person's language. And it's as hard as learning a new language. Does anybody try to study a 2nd or 3rd language here? Yeah, what are you learning? Spanish. Anybody else? English. I grew up in Canada where we learned French until grade 9. It was mandatory. And then I took it throughout high school and I studied in France. I studied in Quebec. And then I never practiced. And so I'm back on like Duolingo now and like trying to learn it again. And I'm like, why is it so hard? There was a point that I was conversational, but like I probably sound like a 10-year-old. Like you can have a decent conversation, a good conversation with a 10-year-old, but it's not a sophisticated vocabulary. I'm probably getting a few 100% I'm getting a few grammatical things wrong. It is hard to learn a new language, and it's equally hard to learn a new love language. So part of being in relationship and part of having compassion, I actually bring it up in another slide about being active, but I think it applies here as well, especially based on your example, Emilio, that part of being compassionate is understanding, okay, what is valuable to the other person? We always hear when we're growing up, like, treat the other person the way you would want to be treated. It's true, but it's also a bit of a misnomer, because maybe you want the diamond necklace, but the other person does not, right? All right, I'm going to go to the next one. Yeah, please.
You asked the question, what makes it hard for us to give people the benefit of the doubt? And so often we're and I think it's connected to this different languages. We're so connected to how we see the world. That we're always putting ourselves in the other person's position, and some, like, if I had done that, this is what I would have been thinking, and therefore, and not actually understanding that this is a different person with a different view of the world, a different lens with which they're experiencing things, and when they do something, it doesn't mean the same thing it means.
Yeah.
Because you have to actually have more conversation.
Yeah, that's so true. One of my friends, I used to feel like that a lot when I was younger, that like, I always do these things. This is how I would do. Why don't my friends do the same thing? And a really good friend said to me, and this was a million years ago, but I always remembered this. He said that if everybody was like you, what would make you special? And that struck my heart, because I was like, yeah, okay, that's right. I would do these things, and that's why I'm special, and they would react in other ways, and that's why they're special. And it's active work to be able to see that and to recognize that. So yeah, thank you for saying that. We talk also about holding safe spaces as a way of exhibiting compassion. Have you heard the term psychological safety? Yeah, psychological safety means if I mess up, I can come to you and say, I'm really sorry that I messed up. This is what happened. And you're not like railing at me, so that the next time I mess up, I'm too afraid to come to you. So this is intense emotional regulation to provide spaces of psychological safety for other people, and it's okay, we're all human. If you lose it, if you're able to like apologize, acknowledge, amend, and say, I'm sorry, that's not how I want to show up, like, please tell me. Creating psychological safety rather, in your personal relationships. We also bring it up at work all the time. People need to be not afraid to make mistakes, and that's how they will grow and become better people. And it's the same thing in relationships.
Yeah, so like as you mentioned here, I like your point about psychological safety
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that we're human, because I think it's helpful to do it for ourselves too.
Yeah.
Psychological safety, there's some passion, because when I notice, like, if I'm kind to myself, it's easy to be kinder to others. And I'm not kind to myself, and I notice that it's harder.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that expression that when your cup is so full, it will naturally spill over, and you're not trying to give from a depleted tank, right? And so how do you fill your cup? By being, providing that compassion and psychological safety to yourself, and all the other things that we're talking about, cultivating that left side of Robin's model. Were you going to say something, Richard?
Yeah, I think like the first one, like the first question was like, if you actually speak louder than words.
Mhm,
So like
mhm.
that, I think it's like an example, right? Like if someone acts in a particular way, even if it doesn't matter, like when they're acting like they do, like it's hard to like even if that's perspective, it's like the ones that it's like if you can make it repeatedly.
It starts to feel empty. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for saying that, and thank you as well. All right. Active. So this room, I'm sure, has heard this expression that love is a verb, right? It means activity. It means action. So we were talking about the soul and how the soul is qualified as Sat, Chit, and Ananda, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. What we say, the jargon we use in Bhakti is the constitutional position of the soul is to love and to be loved. So our intrinsic nature is to serve, actually. And you can see once again that we are always fulfilling this nature, either by serving our loved ones and our friends, but we're also serving the government. We got to pay our taxes even if we don't want to. We're serving our employers. We are always serving, whether we like it or not, whether we recognize it or not, because that is it's again, you can't separate water from being wet. You cannot separate the living entity from being of service. A tree is serving by providing us with fruit or shade. You know, every living entity's dharma, or again, this constitutional position, is to serve. So Radhanath Swami, I'm just going to read my notes here so I don't mess up this story. Radhanath Swami, he always gives this example. So again, Radhanath Swami is another sort of very well-known Bhakti teacher. I know he's Brajrani's guru as well, spiritual teacher. He always, oh, and yes, please, if you don't have, they're phenomenal, life-changing books that he's written. So he was once asked about the best way to express love. And so just about this point of activity, I would love to just read his response to you. So what you see in this photo are redwood trees. Do you guys know where to find redwood trees? Not in New York City. San Francisco, right? On the West Coast, I believe. I don't know. Are they anywhere else in this country? Probably not, right? Yeah, okay. So he says, redwood trees are the tallest and oldest trees that are planted in loose soil that's very sort of hilly on the West Coast. And they have always survived earthquakes and sandstorms and windstorms. And the trees just keep getting stronger and they just keep growing taller and taller. And he said that the roots of the tree, as I explained to you these trees and how they survive all of these atrocities or all of these, dangers, what do you think the roots of the tree look like? What would you think? Mm-hmm.
I guess you expect them to be like big, strong, but it's probably the contrary, thin and small.
Okay, so you expect them to be, I would imagine, like, look how tall these trees are. They're some of the tallest in the world. So for them to withstand all of these, earthquakes and sandstorms and windstorms and all of these things, I would think that, again, they're firmly rooted. They're rooted in the ground and they've got to be quite strong. But actually the roots, they don't go down so far. So to your point, they actually reach outward. So underground, they're to your point, they're quite thin actually, but they reach outward. And so what are they doing? They're connecting to other trees. Yeah, it's cool, right? They actually embrace and wrap around each other. So every redwood, imagine a forest of hundreds and hundreds of redwoods. Every single redwood tree is either directly or indirectly supporting the other. So the redwood tree that you see on this side of the screen, it's either directly or indirectly supporting the redwood tree that you see on that side of the screen, what to speak of beyond the screen. So they have these gigantic ancient roots, but they don't go deep, they go wide. And Radhanath Swami talks about how unity gives strength. And he says, if the branches were wrapped around each other, so not the roots, it wouldn't have the same effect, right? They wouldn't be able to survive the earthquakes and so on. But it's when the roots are connected. So tell me the analogy. What do we take from this as it relates to relationships? And specifically the tree, but also the branch root analogy. How does this apply? Any thoughts?
It's then it just has a family.
Mm-hmm.
It's everyone's like reaching out to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So connection and family. Mm-hmm.
I have just another analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Penguins, like in the Antarctica, they survive by like hugging, right? Like back in the red, it's like 50% of the heat is if you just huggle, like they say 50% of the heat, and that's how they survive the cold weather.
Yeah.
So the same thing is like a group put together, it's like unity is stronger than like individual.
Yeah.
It's like what economy is great, right? Like some of product is greater than individual product.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of life lessons to learn from penguins, but we can talk about that later. Yeah, so he talks about how our hearts need to be unified. Now, what's the difference between the branches and the roots? Any thoughts on that? let me ask you a question. When you are going through something and you turn to friends for advice, everybody, I'm sure, I hope, in your life is a good person. The people who don't seem to have some sort of spiritual or deep grounding, what's the difference in their advice versus the advice that comes from people who seem to have some spiritual or other sort of grounding? What's the difference? So tell me, so I just had a bad breakup, let's say, and I go to somebody for advice. What's the difference between one friend and another?
There's like this sense of like anger and like kind of being like a yes man. And like reinforce that anger
Yeah.
that you have with someone who's more grounded. Perspective.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah. What else, May?
Yeah, I feel like when someone who's not as grounded, I'm actually reading a book about communication based off like the 3 gunas and things like that.
Oh, cool.
And it reminds me kind of the examples in the book where if you're talking to someone not grounded, maybe they speak with you, but there would be roadblocks in the communication because they would be doing things, as you said, like just giving you like yes man talk or encouraging anger or just like breezing over it and like trying to distract you versus somebody grounded would kind of just like really listen to you and like repeat, almost they give ways to kind of almost like repeat what the person has said to really make sure that like they know you understood. And then in that way they're not really pushing anything onto you, they're just like empathizing with you and like letting you process it yourself and come to your own terms with it.
That's so nice. What's the name of the book?
It's called, it's in my bag.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I would love to read it.
It's great. It's called Relationships That Work.
Oh, by who?
By David B. Wolf.
Wait, and it's about the gunas?
Yeah, he references, it's based off the 3 gunas. Yeah. There's even like,
Who is this guy?
yeah, it's amazing. There's even a quiz in the back to see like which like basically which gunas, like which guna you're most in, basically, like if you're mostly tamasic right now or rajasic. Yeah, it's really great. I recommend it.
Yeah, that's crazy. You're gonna see that on the book table next week. All right. Thank you for sharing that, May, and everybody. So I feel like if we take this analogy further, the branches are the people again who are not so rooted, and they'll tell you things like they'll be like the yes man. They'll you know they won't help you, to your point, reflect back and look inside. They might be really good people. So I say this without judgment. Their solutions might be like, let's go get drunk tonight. You know, like I'm taking you out. And again, really well-intentioned people. So I don't say that with judgment. Like, let's go party tonight. Let's go drink. Like we're gonna, like that works. Like if the branches were supporting each other, like that's still support, but it's not rooted and it won't withhold. What is the word? Withstand? It won't withstand the earthquake or the windstorm or so on, right? So it's nice. It's nice to have support, but we need that support to be from the roots, rooted. So this is where I was going to talk about the 5 love languages and how part of being active in relationship is to, again, understand what the other person's language is and to try to learn that. And also to be patient as you try to teach that language to your friend or partner as well. And then the last piece on this slide that I wanted to just bring up is expectations. Because everybody says you shouldn't have expectations of people and then you won't be disappointed. How does that make you feel? Yeah, it's like impossible. It's impossible.
There's like some truth to it. I feel like you shouldn't expect to do what you would do in a situation like that or to be disappointed. But I think you should expect like very little kindness.
Yeah.
But I think you have it.
Yeah. Yeah. There is another, we'll talk about this more later, but there's another Bhakti monk called Satchidananda Swami, who always talks about how you're going to have association, which is good, But to find like-minded association is much more rare. And those like-minded people might actually just be a handful, 5 or less, literally, might be like just a handful of people. And we should be active in all of our relationships, but those are the relationships where we should invest our hearts, go to, to them for advice, give advice, but also where some expectations are okay, and they're healthy. And we can't have more than the bare minimum. But, with others, just I think expectations is an important thing to meditate on. What am I expecting of people? Is it reasonable? Is it rational? Is it not? Where is it coming from? So that's another way to be active in relationship, is to continuously question what they are. Because if we just let that become sort of programmed and automatic, it's bound to create some conflict. Okay.
The other thing about expectations is it's important to make sure you're sharing those expectations. I think one of the big challenges is unspoken expectations.
Yeah.
So if you've got an expectation for someone and you articulate it and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna show up in that way, it's not an expect.
Yeah.
But so often we're expecting stuff and we're just like, it's in here going like, well, I expected you to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I really wanted my husband to read my mind when we first got married. I was like, why can't, why are you not Krishna? Like this, how do you not understand exactly what I'm thinking, exactly what I need you to say, exactly like what I need right now? Go figure that out and then come back. But it's true. And it's hard also. That's also active. Thanks for saying that. I wrote it down so that I can say that next time also, that it's nobody can read your mind. And I feel like when I say that, everyone's like, yeah, of course not. But we all expect people to read our minds without realizing that that's an unconscious expectation. So bringing our expectations to the forefront of our consciousness will be really helpful as well. Thank you. That's such a good point.
Yeah, I think of the root analogy, it's like almost like if someone knows, like a family, someone who knows ever seen you more like for a long time, like that's high school or something. It's easier for them to like influence you versus like the branches where you like people, but it means you just may not know it that well, like some acquaintance. It's like it's harder. It might still provide value perspective. They don't know like fully you find it.
Sure.
It's harder to provide that kind of support.
Sure. I think that that's true for a lot of people. I think it's also not true for a lot of people. I think that some people's families, unfortunately, are not the roots for them. And that sometimes you can meet someone who can be that root. But I appreciate that. That's hopefully the case for most people. Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of psychological safety.
Mhm.
It's like when you have people you can count on and that are reliable, then you feel better. You don't feel as anxious.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. I promise I'm almost done talking. So we're going to do 2 more slides. So steady was the last one here. So what do you think brings steadiness in relationships? So we've talked a lot about that today. With everything that we've talked about, that brings steadiness in relationship. But what else comes to your mind? What's required for a relationship to be steady? Mm-hmm. Compromise.
I don't know if it like defines it, but like if you have like a long relationship, the longevity of the relationship kind of defines like steadiness, because there's like give and take with everything in life, right? It's just like,
Okay. Yeah. What else comes to mind? Mm-hmm.
Emotional durability.
Emotional durability. Can you say more?
Like when you feel offended or you feel like your boundaries getting crossed, like she said, to express yourself instead of holding it in.
Yeah.
Like those little things add up eventually, and then you might pop off for some little shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Thank you. What do I need to, how do I, what's the skill that I need to be able to do that? Yeah, like if I want, if like, let's say you just said that and I'm like, that's so cool, emotional durability, and that makes sense. How do I get that? What would you say?
Meditating, spending a good amount of time alone, things like that, resting properly, watching your diet, exercising. That's really important stuff.
Can we like switch spots? You want to talk about that stuff? And I'll take your spot. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. In Bhakti, we talk about how the basis of our relationships is something higher, right? The basis of our relationship is actually the fact that we are all actually united. You see in this world how divided everybody is, but actually every spirit soul is united because we come from the same source. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the analogy is given that the source is the big fire and we're all sparks of that fire. So we are of a different quantity, but the same quality, because the spark of the fire has the same qualities as the big fire. And so it's actually ridiculous to be divided when we're of the exact same nature and quality, to love and to serve one another. And so in Bhakti, we talk about when the basis of our relationship is on this sort of absolute higher level, then there's more likelihood for the relationship to be steady, because then we see people differently. So for example, in Bhakti, again, we talk about how we say part and parcel. That's the expression that we use. So again, as sparks of the fire, the big fire, we're part and parcel of that larger fire. So we are all children of the same God, regardless of what we call him or her. So God can be called Krishna, he can be called Allah, he can be called Jehovah, he could be called so many different names. We are all children of the same God. We are all actually united. So this division based on different names of God it's like Prabhupada, that same person who brought this philosophy over. He gives the analogy that, like, the prime minister. So the prime minister in Canada is Justin Trudeau. And then, so people call him like honorable prime minister. His wife calls him, husband. His kids call him dad. Somebody else calls him Jay. Somebody else calls him Justin. It's the same person, different names based on the relationship, right? Based on how I know you. So that's how exactly what Bhakti teaches us, that God has different names based on how people choose to relate to him or to her. So that's the only reason. When I see you, if I'm having a conflict with you in a relationship, but I force myself to remember that, like, wait, you're also a spirit soul. And every spirit soul is struggling on his or her spiritual path. When you are friends with people who are also on a spiritual journey to understand who God is, understand who they are, to try to rise higher, then it's almost harder when you are in conflict with a person of the same. Like, for example, a lot of people will come to Bhakti and then they'll feel like, how did this Bhakti practitioner and I have such a big conflict? How could they have done that to me? Does that mean that Bhakti is like a big waste, or like spirituality is, so many people rightfully feel so hurt by the activities of people in spirituality that they just go away from spirituality. Suddenly they don't want it anymore. And I'm not talking about like the serious, like abusive things, but even just, on a smaller level, but still hurtful and important, like just regular conflict. When you experience that with somebody, especially who's also on a spiritual path, it can really hurt. But according to Bhakti, if we can reframe our thinking to think about, all of us, according to Bhakti, are spirit souls struggling in these material bodies to remember our relationship with God and to ultimately go back to and be home with him outside of this material realm and in the spiritual realm. But we're here in this material realm because there's still things that we need to learn. There are still things that we haven't figured out yet that we need to sort of figure out and remember to revive our loving relationship with him. And in that process, the analogy is given that imagine that this whole material world is like a hospital and we are sick and we are in the hospital. Those who choose to like take to a spiritual path are in the hospital getting treatment so that we can become cured and get out of this world that's characterized by war and famine and drought and all of these horrible things that we're seeing in our face every day these days. So the analogy is given that we cannot get mad at a person who is sick for being in the hospital. If a person is in the hospital while they're sick, we can't get mad at them because they're trying to get better. You can't get mad at somebody who's in the shower for being dirty because they're in the shower, they're trying. So when we have this mentality that everybody's trying, everybody's on their journey, then it brings things like compassion and forgiveness. It makes it a little bit easier. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but it makes it easier. Okay. All right. Last slide, second last slide, actually. Cultivating these qualities that we talked about. So we talked about these core needs, and we talked about the qualities of a lasting relationship and a healthy relationship. So to cultivate those qualities starts from within. And so remember these 4 S's. So these are 4 Sanskrit words, and we'll go over each of them. So sadhana. Does anybody know what sadhana means? Archit? Okay, sadhana actually means like a routine, a spiritual daily routine. So remember, we're talking about to build healthy relationships and to maintain healthy relationships, we have to start by going inside. And to your point, Emilio, because you should be sitting here and I should be sitting there, you talked about things like meditation. And so that's a really nice example of a spiritual practice or routine. So establishing that for yourself. The second Sanskrit word is called sadachar, and sadachar means good character. So good character, again, the whole talk was based on how to develop good character. It's by looking inside, it's by doing work. We talked about things that are hard. Being accountable is hard. Providing psychological safety is hard. Learning somebody else's love language is hard. But these things build our character. And when we have strong character, we'll know that we're going to need help before we help somebody else get up from the cliff. And that's how we can create healthy, long-lasting relationships. Now, one really important point here, and somebody mentioned this earlier, and I just want to, it's a really important point. To develop sadachar, we need a good sense of the difference between reality and the narratives that we tell ourselves in our mind. So we started this talk by talking about how we are not the body, but we are the soul. But in Bhakti, it goes a level deeper. There's what we call the gross body, which is what you think about, your, flesh, blood, race, gender, all of that. There's also something called the subtle body. And the subtle body is comprised of our minds, our intelligence, and what we call false ego, which means our false identifications with things that are material. So that's a whole class. But the main point here is that the subtle body is also not who we are, which means I am different from my mind, which means I am different from my thoughts, which means I have the capacity to observe my thoughts and not identify with them. And when I do that, that's a superpower, because we all identify with our thoughts. When we talk about being the soul, in the Bhakti tradition, we learn that death means that the soul moves from one body to the next to the next. So the physical body is consistently changing, but the subtle body is coming with me all the time. So my subtle body is carrying impressions from all of these multiple lifetimes, and it's carrying narratives. That's why some people are born with insecurities, because the subtle body was there in a previous life when somebody made them feel very insecure or some circumstance happened. The subtle body carries all of these thoughts and impressions, so that when the husband comes home with the necklace, the wife is thinking that, like, my husband doesn't value me. My husband thinks that I'm stupid. My husband doesn't have the time for me. My husband thinks this. It's a whole story that she can tell herself. And if she doesn't recognize that this is a story and I don't have to identify with it, because once you identify, it's the same thing as victimhood. Once you identify with being a victim, it's so hard to attach that thought from the reality. So we need to identify our narratives. When somebody, so for example, the friend that I told you about, who said that she didn't think of anything that she held responsibility for in her failed marriage, her narratives are, I'm a victim. I did everything right. I'm a really good person. And this person is really, really bad. And this person is all of these things. These are stories she's telling herself. And if we're not careful, she'll get attached to that identity of being a victim. And then in her next relationship, the next person could just do something wrong by accident. And it just feeds this mentality, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I realized that was like a lot in just a couple minutes to explain one bullet on the slide. But the main point of that is to understand that developing high character is to separate ourselves from our thoughts. What's the best way to do that? How can we become observers of our thoughts rather than identifying with them? What do we do? Mhm.
Mindful meditation.
Can you just sit here? Like seriously. Mindful meditation, I think journaling is also really nice, right? Like when you write out your feelings, sometimes you might read it later and be like, whoa, that was intense and that's not how I feel now. Or that's, that's not who I am. This is the mind really going crazy. So becoming an observer of our thoughts is really important. And the last point about this, the functions of the mind are thinking, feeling, and willing. Thinking, feeling, and willing, the more we meditate on a particular thought, what happens? It manifests in what? Sorry? Did you say something? May? Oh, feeling. So thinking, feeling, and willing will ultimately manifest in behavior. When you really start to feel something, you know what? I really like this guy. I just start to think about it. Now I'm meditating on it. I'm really feeling it. Now I'm willing to ask him out. It will result in behavior, actually doing that behavior. When we behave in certain ways consistently, that forms habits, and our habits form our character, which is sadachar, right? So it all starts at the level of thought. Bhakti is also known as Krishna consciousness. And we hear this term in the mindful meditation world about, being conscious, being a conscious leader, being a conscious meditator, and so on. We have to be conscious of our thoughts. If we want to develop good character, then we have to develop good thoughts. And so we need to be conscious of what those thoughts are. When they are negative thoughts, we will develop negative characteristics. Okay? All right, Sangha. Does anybody know what Sangha means? Yeah, association. So we touched on this. Giving versus taking association is something we can be conscious of. When I'm hanging around these people, do I walk away feeling good, or do I walk away not feeling good? What's the vibe? What's the energy that I'm feeling? I'd like to stay with the people who generally uplift and elevate me, right? So, and when somebody is somewhere, maybe a little, I don't know the right word to say, but like a little like behind me in the spiritual journey, then can I give them some association and help bring them along? And when somebody is further than me, can I take that person or those people's association to help me build myself up so that I can then build other people up? Okay, so Sangha, our association, is the most important. And actually, it is said that we are 99.9% of who we associate with. People will judge you by your association. Think about how we all do that. We all judge people by like this person is so amazing. I don't understand how they're friends with that person who's so not amazing. Or oh, she's part of that group. I don't want to be part of that group. Like, it's very normal and natural and actually valid to do that because we are heavily influenced by who we associate with. And then last point is seva. What does seva mean? Anybody know? Mm-hmm. Service. It goes back to that point about contribution. We need to engage in service in order to feel that one of our core needs is being met, and it is a need of the soul. And when that core need is being met, then we show up in a more healthy way in our relationships as well. So if we remember sadhana, which means what? You don't say anything. What does sadhana mean again? Spiritual routine. What does sadachar mean? Character. What does sangha mean? Association. And seva? Service. Okay, cool. So these are all ways to go inside and to try to cultivate these 4 S's. So the other way to go inside, which is how we started and what Emilio said as well, is meditation. And so we did the meditation at the beginning. This mantra, according to Bhakti philosophy, so we've all heard the word mantra before, right? Mantra means like something that we're repeating over and over. I always think of like Thomas, the engine. No, it's a little engine that could. Yeah, that's different from Thomas, right? Yes. Okay. I don't know anything. But what was the little engine that could's mantra? I think I can. So there's lots of different mantras. This is called the Maha Mantra. So mantra means to deliver the mind. That's what mantra means. Maha means the greatest. So this is the greatest chant to deliver the mind. So the essence of this mantra means, O divine, O energy of the divine, please engage me in your service. So it actually means, please help me to cultivate these things, because engaging in your service means sadhana, sadachar, sangha, and seva. So this is it's a prayer. And while that is the essence of the meaning of it, it can be chanted at any time because it's the Maha Mantra. So you could chant this when you're scared, when you're grateful, when you're happy, when you're sad, when you want to pray for anything. This mantra, it's said that it's transcendental sound. So Krishna, who is again the most common name of God, is non-different from his name. So that means when we say the word Krishna, we're associating with him directly. Do you ever go to like a party or like you're in a crowded room and somebody's having a totally random conversation, but then you just hear your name and your ears perk up? It's like, oh, are you calling me? Are you saying something about me? That's Krishna. As soon as he hears his name, he's with you. He's here with you. And so Hare, does anybody know what Hare means? Mm-hmm. Yeah, addressing the energy or the female aspect of God, Radharani. Krishna is Krishna, and Rama is another name of Krishna as well. Krishna means all attractive. Rama means, why am I blanking? Huh? Reservoir of all pleasure. Thank you so much. And Hare addresses this energy of Krishna. Okay, so we're gonna just conclude by doing a little mantra meditation again together. And this time,
I just want to mention, thank you for mentioning this, because I finally get it.
Yeah.
because I was like thinking, like, we're chanting this. I think maybe it's because it's nice to set everything to song. But I didn't know, like, when you made that metaphor of constant engine, I think I kind of think you're actually like repeating a thought that becomes like reality, like you're focusing your mind on something. So I didn't think about this.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. And also, thank you for saying that, because you remind me that sometimes when people tell you to meditate, what time is it? Is it 1? Okay, so we'll just do this for a minute. Sometimes when people ask you to meditate, they'll say, close your eyes and empty your mind. It is exceptionally hard to do that. It's almost impossible to do that, if not actually impossible. Arjun says in the Bhagavad Gita that the mind is harder to control than the wind. So this mantra is a way that we can engage our senses. So we're engaging our tongues and saying something, we're engaging our ears. And we often chant it when we're not doing it in song, we're doing it with meditation beads. So it's your sense of touch. So it just makes it a little easier to concentrate and hear the mantra when we're doing it audibly. Do not worry if your mind wanders, because it will. And the guidance is always like, when the mind wanders, just bring it back. Just try to bring it back. It's important if you decide to take this practice home, that it's not like what most people do, like scrolling the phone and chanting Hare Krishna at the same time and like reading Instagram and like Us Weekly and all of that. So that's probably not the best thing to do, but if the mind wanders on its own, it's okay. Just bring it back. Okay, so we're going to do it together in a different format. So if you don't mind, just sit up straight, and everybody just close your eyes. Thank you for tolerating 2 hours of sitting and talking. Just close your eyes and take a couple of really deep breaths. And if you're thinking about what you're doing for the rest of the weekend, or maybe there's some stress, maybe there's a big to-do list, let's just honor those thoughts for a moment. And then let's put them aside. And let's try our best to really listen to the words of this mantra. So I will start by saying the whole mantra once, and then just join me. And if you need to open your eyes to read, please do. But just join me and we will chant together just a few times. And I will begin. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Please join me. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Last time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Free to open your eyes, and please know that this mantra is here for you at all times, whether you're in the subway or you're walking or you're being intentional and meditating in front of an altar. You can always chant this mantra. Do we have beads? No, okay. Okay. We will eventually have beads available if anybody would like to use beads to chant. It's like a rosary or a tasbih in Islam, where it's like a necklace of beads, and you say this whole mantra on a bead, and then you go to the next bead, and there's 108 beads in one necklace. And typically it takes 7 to 10 minutes to do it one round around the necklace. Okay. All right. Sorry to take all of the time. Any questions or comments, or shall we, is everybody starving? Thank you so much. Great. Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Brother Bhakti, we hope you come back, because we know you will have something else beautiful to share with us, and practical, beautiful and practical.